The storm had arrived with a heavy, oppressive silence. The wind howled through the treetops, bending the branches in unnatural angles. But there was no rain. Not yet. The air was thick with humidity, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The small town of St. Benedict's was eerily quiet, its streets abandoned, the shops closed, and the only signs of life were the flickering lights from the old, dilapidated houses that lined the main road. Nathan, a seasoned fisherman, stood outside the crumbling wooden house he called home, eyes narrowed against the gusting winds. He could feel it, the subtle shift in the air. The town, normally so vibrant with the sounds of children playing and shopkeepers shouting greetings, felt like it had been drained of life. His dog, a black mutt named Cole, stood beside him, whining nervously. Nathan glanced down at his dog, frowning. "What's wrong, boy?" he muttered under his breath. A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, but the clouds above remained dark and thick. It was the kind of storm that had no business being this far inland. The water would rise soon. He could feel it in his bones. As Nathan turned to go back inside, something caught his eye, a faint glow on the horizon, far beyond the town's borders. It wasn't the light of the coming storm, nor the pale yellow of an early evening sunset. This was different, pale, sickly green. Before he could contemplate it further, the wind shifted violently. It struck him like a physical force, pushing him backward, almost throwing him off balance. His grip tightened on the doorframe. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his gut now. It wasn't just the storm or the odd light on the horizon. There was something watching. Suddenly, Cole's barking broke the silence. The dog was tugging violently at the leash, eyes wide with terror, teeth bared at something unseen. Nathan cursed under his breath and yanked the dog back inside, slamming the door shut behind him. The house creaked and groaned under the force of the wind, but inside it was eerily still. Nathan paced across the living room, his feet thudding heavily against the wooden floor. There was a hollow, oppressive quiet to the place. Too quiet. Then he heard it. A low, guttural sound like a distant chant, but so faint that he wondered if he had imagined it. It was coming from the direction of the town square, somewhere beyond the dense trees at the end of the street. The voice wasn't human. It was something old, something that had not seen the light of day for centuries. A shiver ran down Nathan's spine, but he shook it off, muttering, "It's just the wind. It's just the storm." He reached for his coat, thinking he might take a walk to clear his mind, but before he could leave, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. Nathan froze. There were no visitors out here, not in weather like this. His hand trembled as he reached for the door, opening it just a crack. The figure standing in front of him was a man, a large man draped in a tattered cloak, his face obscured by shadows. His presence felt wrong. "I need your help," the man said, his voice low and raspy, as though he hadn't spoken in years. Nathan's pulse quickened, and instinctively, he stepped back. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, a deep, unnatural green. "The saints are coming," he whispered. "You must leave now before they find you." Nathan opened his mouth to protest, but the words died on his tongue. The strange man was already gone, disappearing into the night like a shadow melting into the earth. His heart pounded in his chest as he closed the door, locking it behind him. He hadn't believed in superstitions or any of the old stories that floated around St. Benedict's. But the man's words, something about them felt so horribly real. Cole whimpered, pacing anxiously by the door. Nathan ignored the dog and moved to the window, pulling back the faded curtains. Outside, the green light was growing brighter, flickering as if it were alive. The storm had become a violent fury now, the wind howling like a wounded animal, and still the sound of that distant chanting persisted. Nathan's stomach churned. He turned away from the window, feeling his hands shake. The saints. The stories he had heard as a child rushed back to him, legends of ghostly figures who had once been part of an ancient order, cursed by a long-forgotten battle. Saints, but not of the kind meant to save people. No, these were the kind that came to claim what was theirs, and they would not stop until the town had been swallowed whole by their hunger for vengeance. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the events. But then the door slammed open. Cole went berserk, barking wildly, but it was too late. From the shadows of the doorway, a figure emerged, tall, thin, and impossibly pale. Its eyes were glowing green, just like the light on the horizon. "Leave this place or become one of us," the figure whispered, its voice like the wind itself, cold and relentless. Nathan backed away, heart pounding in his chest. But the figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching him, until the shadows in the room began to stretch, grow longer, darker, as if the very walls were closing in. The ground beneath him groaned with an ancient hunger, and in that moment, Nathan understood. The Buccaneers, the pirates of old, whose ghosts had been trapped in the town centuries ago, had returned. But they weren't after treasure. They were after souls. The last thing Nathan heard was the sound of the wind, a shrill, tortured wail that felt like the scream of the earth itself. Then, nothing. The storm, the green light, the chanting, it all faded into the night, and the town of St. Benedict's was still, silent, waiting. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of the Buccaneers' footfalls echoed softly in the dark.